So the first thing we teach leaders is you need to message very clearly what you want in your culture. Number two, you must model the message. You cannot tell them to do something that you yourself is unwilling to do.
Yes.
Because if you do that, they're gonna model your model more than they model your message. Because your message loses all its power if what they see is you doing something that violates your own message, with some exceptions, but for the most part, you'll see that. But third, we call it the...
Hello. Welcome to another Knowledge Bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. If this is your first time joining us, please consider subscribing and hit that notification bell and hit that like button. This will be greatly appreciated in helping getting out this content to great leaders and great individuals like yourself. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Brandon Miller. Brandon is the founder and CEO of 34 Strong, a coaching and consulting firm dedicated to improving employee engagement. He has nearly 15 years of experience providing specialized leadership training, coaching, advising, and facilitating. Please help me welcome Brandon with Maximizing Your Team's Strengths. This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
So I am the co-founder of a company called 34 Strong. We work with clients to build their strengths-based organizations. So we like to partner with leaders that want to think about building a positive workplace culture that creates a space where employees feel that they can really give themselves to their work, engage at a high level, while at the same time enjoying personal well-being and quality of life. And so we're committed to what we call the mission to a million smiles. We know that when people enjoy high well-being because of a great job, they smile and laugh more often.
Yeah.
And laughter is good medicine for the soul. And when one laughs and smiles, they can affect 9 to 12 people with their joy. And so we figure if we could get to 100,000 lives impacted by great workplaces, we could touch 1 million people through our efforts. So we spend half of our time with companies, so for-profit entities, often privately held, though we do work with some large entities like Microsoft or Home Depot, but most of our work is going to be mid-sized, family-owned, somewhere between 500 to 1,000 employees, or government. And government is challenging. There's different challenges to both sides. And when we come in, if I just talk about a business, at the end of the day, a business group of leaders, they're going to think about their profit, because profit is the viability and health of the business. They have more options. And so what we share with them is that when you attend to the lead measure, and the lead measure to profit is something called employee engagement. That's the level of influence and impact each individual contributor can have in the overall health of the company. And so we like to measure this and give the people leaders a good snapshot of, here's where you're at. Here's the health of your organization. So here's a case study. A company we work with that has about 1,000 employees. They're in the retail space, privately held, so owned by father and son primarily. We measured the health of their people leaders, and we found that out of 100% of the leaders, 37% of them were engaged at work. So there was 137 surveyed, wow. 37%, so only a third, were showing up to do the kind of work that any executive team would want from their people leaders. So remember, these are influencers of teams, influencers of departments, 63% of them not engaged, not in a good place. So what we began to do was to help them shift their human development or people development strategy. And when I say that, all I'm really referring to is the fact that whether it's your home, your school, your sports team, your church, or your place of work, everyone has the job of developing people. We all do it. We all have to do it. What we simply introduce is there are two pathways. One of them is called conventional, and the other one is called the strengths-based approach. Conventional focuses on fixing weaknesses. You have gaps. We all have gaps. You have incompetencies, areas that aren't good. And we're going to put maximum effort to fixing you as opposed to, well, let's flip the script. What if we put maximum effort into maximizing you, helping you be the best
Mm,
version of who you already are? So
yeah.
we introduced this to them and their leaders. So they began to train the executive team and train the directors down into the people managers. And within 1 year, they went from 37% people engagement to 51%, which may not sound like a huge jump, but here's why that's important. Once you pass halfway, you now have more people on the side of engagement than not. So you've
Wow. Yeah,
essentially
yeah, yeah.
changed the culture. It's now
Yes.
more, yeah, it's more appropriate here to work hard and do our best and be great team members and have good attitudes. But here's what came. This company has been in business for 30, just turned 39. So this was at 38 years. They
Mm.
had their record top line sales in the history of the company that year and record bottom line in the history of the company that year. They made more money than they'd ever made, and they could look back and see the impact of more productive leaders, safer leaders, more efficient leaders, all of that. They could look and see the connection to their efforts.
Wow. You talked about the strengths in the organization,
Yeah,
and I was listening to you talk, and I can name a lot of sports athletes, right? Or
yeah,
even entertainers that they are good not because they know how to do everything, but they are so great and successful because they know how to do that one thing and they do that
that's right.
one thing well. How do you help leaders identify, utilize, and maximize their team strengths?
Well, I want to make a comment on what you just nailed. So,
Hmm.
when we talk to people about the conventional approach to development as compared to the strengths based approach,
Mhm.
we tell them every time, you already know this approach. You've been doing
Mm.
it your whole life.
Uh,
If you've played athletics or participated in performing arts,
wow.
you were always positioned to do what you do best. Always.
Yes.
My son is a quarterback for his junior high football team. Tall kid, throws the ball really well. If they put my son at tackle, I'd be upset.
Yeah.
I would be upset if they asked him to go against really large young men and have to, try to move him around instead of doing what he does best, which is throw the football. That kid belongs throwing a football.
Yeah.
And no coach out there worth his salt would put this kid. In fact, they won't let him play defense. He can't be on special teams. And when he's asking why, coach, why, and they said because you're the quarterback, right?
Yeah.
So we get this approach. So when we talk to leaders in organizations, we simply tell them, we're not asking you to do something you don't know. We're just simply offering you something you've already done.
Amazing.
What if you changed the way you develop? This is the key, your middle managers. You see,
Mm.
most leaders in a company do not have heavy management responsibility anymore. Their job is vision, strategy,
Yeah.
direction. They're overseeing. They've
Yeah.
entrusted management to a team that sits in the middle. So these are entry level supervisors, usually up to directors, even some vice presidents. And in that middle lies the greatest potential to advance any company's culture or any government agency's culture.
Mm.
The challenge though is that most people who end up in a management job are there because either one, they just happen to know the job and they're good at it,
Yeah.
okay, or two, they've just been around, seniority. They've just been around. Well, these are good reasons to promote people, but these are limited reasons. So what we simply challenge them to do is think about the talents that you want in a great manager
Mm.
and then train them not only to get people to perform, but to engage while they perform. Train them,
Mm.
give them resources, give them tools. Because here's a simple poll we did. Out of 1,000 CEOs who were asked a very simple question, how many of you have a robust training programs to teach your middle managers how to engage your people?
Mm.
Out of that group, less than 5% had anything.
Wow.
Most had no training whatsoever. They simply asked people to go in and do it. And this is why nationally our engagement rate sits at 33%.
Mm.
It's only a third of our workforce. And so when we work with these leaders, what we challenge them to do is first, let's work with you and all your people leaders. And secondly, let's start to address it inside your teams. And how we begin to build. And so the assessment itself, to answer your question directly, it simply just becomes an internal language.
Mm.
So the 34 strengths inside of this assessment, they tell you each one an aspect of human behavior, human ability, human performance. And learning the language just gives you and I an ability to say, oh, you're an achiever and
Yeah.
I'm a maximizer. So you like to work hard to achieve results. I like to take things that are good and make them great. I like to upgrade. So let's talk about how we can cooperate, knowing
Wow.
we lead with these strengths.
Wow. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And Brandon, what I like about this, because you said something when you first said it, and I actually wrote it down on the paper because I have to follow up with this. You approach it with the mid-level, but you also deal with the upper management as well, if I'm correct,
We
right?
always, yeah, we always go through the top to come
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
We've tried, because of just how we got in the door in certain places. We've tried to come from the bottom up
Mhm.
or the middle, up and down. So let me describe, an enterprise type of situation. So a massive company like Johnson and Johnson, we worked with
Mhm.
them. So we can affect a team within that massive organization, and they can be very engaged
Yeah.
because it's enough of an intact unit inside of an ocean of a company. That's not the case in mid-sized companies. They have a lot more touch points with the executive leaders. And that team, we like to say it's the 3 M's. So the first thing we teach leaders is you need to message very clearly what you expect. What do you want in your culture? Number
Yeah.
two, you must model the message. You cannot
Mm.
tell them to do something that you yourself is unwilling to do.
Yes.
Because if you do that, they're going to model your model more than they model your message. Because your message loses
Mm.
all its power if what they see is you doing something that violates your own message, with some exceptions, but for the most part, you'll see that. The third, we call it the mirror test.
Mm.
And the mirror test is if the leadership team, the executive leaders, are factually modeling and they're factually messaging, they will see reflected back, usually quickly, a shift in culture, because all culture is the accepted norms inside of any organization, any family, any grouping,
Yeah.
and you've now established new norms that you can now start to hold people accountable to.
Brandon, those are a load of knowledge bombs. This is amazing. This is amazing. You're dropping some knowledge on us. With working with companies, you mentioned a company like Johnson Johnson, which is a larger company, larger scale, that you may only can target a certain department or certain team or whatever.
Yeah.
Have you experienced things like that team has overachieved and there was so much improvement in that area that the companies begin to implement this program throughout the entire companies?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we've seen that work two ways. One, the company watches the results. So in this case, using this example, it was a sales team,
Mm.
and they were outperforming index. So there was interest. And where it started, because that's so massive, was a sister group saw it and they
Mm.
said, "What are you doing over there?"
Mm.
And then another group like, "What are you doing over there?" And then that's the domino. So it starts
Uh,
that way, in a large group. In smaller settings, we've unfortunately seen the reverse. So we've seen a group start to really shine, and we've actually watched poor leaders pull it back because it
mm.
wasn't in their way of doing things. They
Wow.
were going off brand. So I've seen, thankfully, more of the positive, but sometimes leaders, believe it or not, they get jealous
Wow.
which is so fascinating. You're jealous of success in your own organization.
Yeah.
People will be people.
I
People
love
are
it.
going to do what people do. And sometimes we've seen the reverse where it's no, 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 no. We like this program, even if that one's not working.
Mm.
It's still what they've accepted, and we accept that as just part of the reality of working in the people business. It's really interesting. I got to hear a talk with one of the senior vice presidents of a company called Accenture.
Mm.
And Accenture has somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000, maybe more, a huge number of employees. And the senior vice president was sharing his testimony that when he learned about strengths, he was so curious about his wife's strengths. And so
Mm.
the person that was working with him and doing the sales call said, well, I tell you what, why don't I go ahead and give you an access code for your wife to also learn her strengths, and then the two of you, I can talk to you. So that was the follow-up, that he
Mhm.
got to talk about the person's wife. And the person was so incredibly impressed by how much this helped his marriage. he
Wow.
said, he said, this changed my entire marriage. I mean, this solved 10-year conflicts. This helped us to understand why we're
Mm.
so different and why those differences are okay. They're actually good for us. And that was the doorway into a large organization becoming a strengths-based organization like Accenture, is that it went home. And so many of our leaders, many of our managers, individual contributors will ask us, hey, can I do this with my family? What about my kids? And so very commonly this will make its way into the personal settings.
Speaking of the strength finders, I was talking to a vice president just today of a company that has over 3,000 employees. And he was asking about the podcast. And I was telling him about the amazing interview I have today. And I was telling him what it was about. What was strange to me, he said he never heard of strength finding this podcast to him, but it was just so amazing. He wasn't even thinking in that area in general.
28 million people worldwide have
Mhm.
learned their strengths so far, or at least participated in the assessment. So 28 million results probably is, because some people have taken it more than once, not quite that number, in, I want to say 60 countries and 30 languages. So based on, a planet with maybe 7 or 8 billion of us, we got a
Mm.
long way to go.
Long way.
Most of those people are found in the United States because Gallup is headquartered here. And so StrengthsFinder, as it was originally called, which now they branded it Clifton Strengths after the founder, Dr. Donald Clifton, and his family, there is still reach. There's still opportunity here because we like to say in our world, a lot of green grass and blue sky, a lot of open pasture here, because there are many that when they hear this concept, as you said with sports, it resonates almost immediately.
Yeah.
But then the questions come in, which are, well, does that really work? And can you really ignore the weaknesses? Can you really just pretend like they're not there? But what if it's part of their job?
Yeah.
And so we deal with these questions every day, and we acknowledge that, true, if someone's hired to do a job, they need to do the job.
Mm.
But let's imagine for a second that someone has multifaceted parts of that job. And if you could identify the parts that they really do well, the parts that are where and they know you're getting the best return on your investment in that individual. And then the areas where they're just working here. It's why it's called work. They're
Yeah.
just doing the stuff, we call it the grind. They're just doing the grind of the job, just going through what's got to get done.
Mm.
Well, what if you could position them to do a bit more of what they do best more of the time, maybe even half or more than what they don't?
Yeah.
We tell them you're probably going to get a better outcome. And that makes sense to leaders. That they go, okay, that's just math. Now we're just
Yeah.
doing mathematical equations on return on investment. This is what can tip them to tell me more. I want to understand more. Give me some insights into what this could look like.
Let's start here. Let me ask this question first. If someone was to work with you, and you can kind of explain, the process of, do you do B2B, of how you actually work with people?
Sure.
If they work with you, what can they expect?
Sure. Typically, the top of the relationship or the beginning starts with somebody experiencing the assessment for themselves. So for
Mm.
your listeners, for that person who's sitting here going, okay, I'm curious, the first step is, let's get you a code to unlock your strengths.
Mm.
Let's get you
Love it.
in your hands something that you can read about you and see, okay, I could see myself here. Because my challenge to you would be, some years back, around 2003, I was given a code, and I went online and took this assessment, and I literally thought someone had been following me around because I could not believe how accurate this was. These were words that I would never have used to describe myself. I wouldn't have ever said I'm a maximizer. I'm an activator. I would not have used those, but when I read the description, I went, oh my gosh, like this is like looking in the mirror. This is so, and with depth and with a depth to it that I went, whoa, there's even layers here that I could continue to build on. So that's number one. Then what we typically encourage, deeply encourage, is if you're interested and you're in a leadership role and you have a leadership team, let's start with giving your leaders also a chance to take the assessment and then sign up for a 2 or 3 hour workshop, a learning session to see what this is. Does it fit your model? Does it fit the way you think about yourselves and your teams and your organization? Whether you're, micro, I'm a micro company. We have 20 full-time employees and then contractors who help us, but we're micro or macro or mid-size, whatever you are, or you're a government agency or you're, a not-for-profit, whatever that is. Does it fit your model of development? And is it a time for you potentially, because you've been looking at results and you think, I think we could be better. I think we could do more. I think we could improve. That's where we love to partner with you. We have a template roadmap, but we help you build the one that fits for you. Yeah. Every situation we work with is custom. Every situation we encounter is different. And then we want to help you decide how far you want to take this. And that's the journey that begins with, let's see what the strengths tell you. See what you learn.
So you said you took the StrengthsFinders back in 2003. What has it done for you personally?
Oh, wow. So it set the trajectory of my career in a whole different direction. I am doing the work I'm doing now because of that, that day. I have long since left behind trying to change myself into someone I'm not. Wow. So instead of wasting time trying to be a different version of Brandon, I'm pretty good with the one I am. And I want to make Brandon a better version of who I am. And that transformation was freeing to me to where I wasn't comparing myself to others to be more of who they were. And that allowed for freedom to lead and then freedom to lead others into that understanding of how they could grow into more of who they are. So there is a book that I recommend to every team of managers and leaders we work with, as well as we train, we call them ambassadors, strengths and engagement ambassadors inside of organizations. So this is required reading. There's 2 books. The first one is a book called Soar with Your Strengths. And Soar with Your Strengths is written by Dr. Donald Clifton. It was written back in the 90s. So you would have to forgive some of the references to companies like Blockbuster and Kodak. But it's a really well written book about why strengths is the way to go. And the book opens with one of the most powerful anecdotes, a little parable about Brer Rabbit. And the parable has to do with our education system, and it opens into business because Dr. Donald Clifton, the founder of StrengthsFinder, his first passion was to change the way we educate kids. And he thought, gosh, if we could give kids the ability to learn at the pace and the subjects that they would know best, we could change their lives. So that's the first one, Soar with Your Strengths. The second book is for the business-minded folks who really would want to know, well, what the economics behind this? What's the business case? And that book is titled First, as in start here first. First, break all the rules. First, break all the rules. And this book is landmark because it essentially dropped a challenge to corporate America as well as other entities, government and whatnot, and said, the book is saying, we challenge you to change the way you manage people, the way you think about developing them, and we guarantee you, if you do this, you're going to see these results. And it's required reading in many leadership programs. It's required reading for many managers that grow, because it just is so fundamentally simple at its core of every person who works for another person needs these things. And here's why a strengths approach helps you do these things. And here's what you get from it. So First, break all the rules. Great business book for leaders that might be thinking about their human development strategy and changes they might want to make.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me ask you this question. If someone wanted to connect with you and
Sure.
what are you doing, where should they go?
Okay, so here is the gift for the people listening to this podcast. I can be directly communicated with at Brandon. That's spelling with a D-O-N, Brandon, at 34strong.com. So the number 3, the number 4, the word strong.com. If a person messages me, I will provide them with a code for them to take the Clifton Strengths, complimentary. And no strings attached. They don't have to meet with us afterwards. They don't have to take a class or anything like that. No strings, just the gift. You can have that gift. If, however, you would like a consult afterward, we will also provide that. And that's whether you're a student or a CEO or anything in between. If you're listening and you think, I want to know my strengths, we will provide you with a code to do that. And that would be our gift to your listeners. And then if they want to have further conversation, they can always message back after we send them the code. If you were to ask a room of 100 leaders, what's the number one quality that a person needs to be a successful leader, you're going to get a myriad of different answers. But through research, most experts would agree that there's only one quality that every successful leader shares, only one. And that quality is very simply self-awareness. It is knowing who you are and knowing who you're not, and being okay with both without judgment of yourself and judgment of others.
Wow. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for that on behalf of Lead to Greatness. Thank you for that information to help us get better, in our lives. I also I have to put this plug here because this book has really been a game changer in my life because of this book that I'm about to show right here. Play to Their Strengths. This is a book, read this book about 6 months ago, and this book has been a dramatic change in my life. And, I'm really sharing, I know we're here talking about leadership, but I mean, I think the best leaders is raising our children, to be the best they can be and setting them up for success early on. So I want you to, just a real quick, just talking about this book.
Absolutely. So my wife and I decided to take the work that I do for a living, and we realized that we had an opportunity with our children to bring that work home. And we have a large family, 7 kids, and 3 of them are married. So now we have 10 of them when we all gather. And we believe that each person has these amazing strengths that are part of who they are, God-given strengths. And we believe that when a person spends more time playing to those strengths, they will live fulfilled lives. They'll fulfill their calling, their future. All kinds of studies show just the power of this. And so this book was written as a gift to parents of just our experience, good, bad, and ugly. Our experience of who we were before we decided to shift to this, how it transformed our relationship with our teenagers, our younger children. And we love to share it as also part of our faith, and how that we connected to both the science and our faith to see how that shaped us. And for any who are thinking about, you're right, the place where you will be judged the most as a successful leader actually won't happen in the business world. It's going to happen with your kids. Absolutely. That's really the balance of how did I do as a leader in life? Well, let's look at these people because you spent the most time with them.
Absolutely. Wow. Another knowledge bomb to go. Brandon, I thank you so much. On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, I want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. And if this podcast was helpful to you, leave a big thumbs up. And also, I want you to check out our Marriage Coach podcast, the podcast with my wife and I. If you're on iTunes, please rate this podcast and leave a review and help get the word out. Again, thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us on today. Looking forward to seeing you again on next week. Till then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace. We out.